Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts. Today I'd like to talk to you about fine motor skill versus gross motor skill as it relates to shooting. We hear this a lot, and one of the things that I try to talk to students in class about is that regardless of what you might hear or see or believe, shooting a gun requires precision movements, which means that you're going to need to employ fine motor skills. That doesn't mean that you're going to not resort to gross motor skills, and therein lies the rub. That's the point that I try to make, is that without a good understanding of what you're doing, what you will end up doing is going to be very gross, meaning very large, not necessarily accurate movements. So for instance, pulling the trigger is a great example of fine versus gross motor skill. The idea is that you need to move the trigger from the front to the rear with minimal disruption to the front sight. So that's going to require fine motor skill. However, if you haven't worked well at developing the fine motor skill of moving that trigger, then what you will resort to is more of a gross motor movement, which is going to be very heavy and large and not very precise, which is one of the reasons why people miss when they're shooting. When do we really see this? It really typically comes up when the shooter is put under a little bit of stress. When stress gets added to the equation, that's where you really start to see the difference between fine and gross motor skill. The elite shooters under stress will still be able to perform at that fine motor level, whereas everybody else is going to be down at the gross motor level. So the key that you're trying to work on is to develop the skill so well that your movements are precise and literally flawless, to the point where under pressure, there's really nothing wrong that could happen other than it being extremely gross. So one of the things that I try to get across to students is everything that you do should have a purpose, and everything that you do should be done as flawlessly as you can possibly do it. Then what you have is you have technique that is so well designed and so well performed that it's going to be precise, it's going to be accurate. So when you look at the difference between fine motor skill and gross motor skill, yes, the two exist. Yes, you're probably going to perform both of them. Yes, both of them might be required. But in the instance of the ability to move that trigger to the rear without disrupting the sights, that's a great example of fine motor skill. Now, there are other techniques or other aspects of your shooting that will have gross motor skills that don't need to be performed at the fine motor level. An example would be loading the magazine. While you might have a difficult time feeding the magazine in the magazine well, and you might have a difficult time hitting that slide stop, it's not going to be as detail oriented as something like the trigger. So you've got to kind of look at your technique and look throughout all those details and try to figure out where do I need to work at, where do I need to put the most amount of my work to develop that fine motor skill as flawlessly and precisely as I possibly can. All right, so a little down and dirty on the fine motor skill versus gross motor skill argument. There's a lot more to it, but that's just, again, a down and dirty. I'd love to hear your questions. Please feel free to post them down below. Until then, take care and stay safe.